All right. Well, today we've got Rowell Dionisio. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that okay.
Yeah, perfect.
And Francois. I don't. Your last name's not even listed there. I know it, but it's not coming to mind right now that I'm on the spot.
Verges.
Vergis, right?
Yes.
Vergis. Just came to me. All right. And you guys, I think, are pretty well known within our Wi-Fi community. Um, I would have to say largely because of your guys' podcast, right? The Clear to Sin podcast that you guys have been doing now for several years at least. You're on episode what nowadays?
I don't even know, 300 something, but I
Mhm.
think we're on our seventh year, 7 years going now.
Wow, 7 years. That is crazy.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Actually, I remember this was before you got your CWNE, Roel, because I think the whole point of your podcast was to kind of share with us your experience in getting the CWNE. Is that
Yeah, I
right?
mean, it was mostly about learning Wi-Fi to get to the CWNE. It wasn't like a CWNE journey per se, but a lot of it was learning the Wi-Fi technology and then trying to reteach that to other people as a way to reinforce the learning.
Yeah. No, it's a great way to do it too. I thought. I remember listening to some episodes when I was going to the gym because that's the only time if I'm either in the gym or if I'm driving is when I'm listening to podcasts. And I wanted something Wi-Fi based, and I came across yours and I started listening to it. And you were talking about, I think you had a couple, maybe it was the NA and another one of the CWNP certs. And I'm like, oh man, I've got to get my NE before this kid gets his. This is crazy. Because I got my NA way back in 2003,
Okay.
and then there was it was probably 12 years before I got my next one,
Oh
which
wow.
was the
Okay.
CW AP. So big huge gap. But anyway, I remember stumbling across your podcast, listening to it, and I thought this is great stuff. So yeah, I'm very appreciative of the podcast you guys have put together and kept alive, which is pretty amazing. 300 plus episodes.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, well, I'm going to start. Sorry, Francois, were you saying
I was
something?
going to say congratulations on starting your own podcast. Roel and I know it's a big deal, so congrats to you, and we wish you all the best in the content you're about to create.
Oh, well, thanks. Yep, I'm on episode 2, and I've already lost my co-host.
It's fine.
Trent Cutler was going to be my co-host. Anybody who knows Trent knows he works at MetaGeek.
Yeah.
Um, he started there and left and just recently went back, and he's got some really cool things he's working on, and he's not been able to make either of our only 2 episodes. So he's like, Todd, I don't think this is going to work out. Too busy with things. So yeah, so kind of a rocky start, but still going to move forward. Well, thanks again, guys, for joining me today. I'm going to start with talking with Roel. Basically, Roel, about how you got into Wi-Fi and how and the why and what have been some of your experiences. So if you could just kind of start us off, how did you get into Wi-Fi? How did that happen? And then, why was Wi-Fi something that you wanted to focus on for your career?
Yeah. So when I got into Wi-Fi, I wanted to be more of a network engineer at the time. And I was working for a managed service provider where I was thrown into an environment that had a large distributed Cisco network, including the Wi-Fi was also Cisco. And this company just relied on Wi-Fi a lot. So this was when it was a Cisco 4400 controllers. And I just had to dive in, know how to configure it, know the access points. I was dealing with the 1200 series access points, those tanks at the time. And when I was doing Wi-Fi, at the time I was doing it all very wrong, right? Hiding them in the ceilings, putting them so no one can see them, that kind of thing. But then issues started coming up. And when I really got into Wi-Fi was following Keith Parsons' podcast, as well as Blake Croney. He had a podcast as well. And so I started listening to theirs, and I figured out, oh, I'm doing this all kind of wrong. I'm supposed to start with design first, and then learn how to configure them. And so I went down the CWNA path. I learned how to use Ekahau, and if I could, I would go back and fix all those Wi-Fi issues. But hopefully, somebody has already taken a look at that, and my name probably got thrown out there. They're like, "Hey, this guy Rowell configured it. Doesn't work very well." Probably looked
It's
me
his
up,
fault.
and he's like, "This guy knows Wi-Fi. Like, he knows something." But yeah, it's one of those
Well, I
that.
gotta think that's how a lot of people started out.
Oh yeah,
Right? A
yeah.
lot of people started out on the networking side, and they get tasked with
I don't know a lot of people
installing
who.
Wi-Fi.
I don't know a lot of people who just start with Wi-Fi. I don't know. Maybe Francois is the only one, but
I did.
you did? Okay, yeah. I started off
did,
actually
yeah.
in help desk and systems administration. Wasn't really dealing with Wi-Fi until I really wanted to go down the network engineering side. So my background is in systems administration, network engineering, and then I got into Wi-Fi.
Oh, that's awesome. And now that you've been into Wi-Fi now for several years in your career, would you say Wi-Fi is currently your focus, or are you still doing a mix of regular, network management or whatnot?
It's primarily the focus, but I do a lot of network engineering tasks. So, I mean, not too long ago, I was dealing with some GPON stuff, and I deploy firewalls quite often, actually. So I just don't talk about those things as much. I like to talk about Wi-Fi more, just because it's more mysterious to a lot of people, right? They see that you just deploy an access point, Wi-Fi just works, but they may not know that it's working optimally or even better than it can be. And so that's why I just like to talk about Wi-Fi, to try to help other people understand how Wi-Fi works, just as much as a network engineer would learn how BGP works, right? I wouldn't just go into an environment and go, we need to install BGP. I'm just going to wing it and, take all the routes on the internet, that kind of thing, right? And we see what happens when somebody makes that kind of mistake on the internet, and all of, a major company like Facebook gets all their routes going through China, for example. So it's just like any other technology. It's just you got to take time and effort to learn it.
So what have you done, or what are you doing that excites you the most about Wi-Fi?
I like testing different things. So lately, I've been going back to topics that I may have just brushed over just through certification process. So like this morning, I was just looking at the BSS load element and why it's called BSS load, whereas before it was called QBSS load, and all these things. I did packet like frame captures with the tools that I have, and looking at how different APs work versus other APs. So like just seeing how devices and APs communicate, how they all work differently, how they interpret the standards. So those are the kind of things I kind of like doing at the moment, more so than doing actual validation surveys or things like that.
So you like getting your hands on some of the newer APs,
Yeah.
loading them up in your lab, starting your PCAP, and just
Try to
seeing how they
understand
work
it,
and
right?
what they're doing.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be
Gotcha.
at a super, super deep level. I'm not trying to be like Peter McKenzie type, he just knows those things like he was born with the knowledge, but just getting a good understanding to help then educate clients or customers, for example. So they just not too long ago, I had a discussion with someone who said they were asking me to help them upgrade to 6 gigahertz. And when he was describing it to me, he was like, yeah, I want to upgrade to Wi-Fi 6. And I was like, do you want to upgrade to Wi-Fi 6 or Wi-Fi 6E? Because there's 6 gigahertz now. If you're going to do that upgrade and you're going to keep those APs for 5 years, 3 years, whatever, probably 6 gigahertz APs is the way to go. And he's like, yeah, 6 gigahertz. I'm like, okay. And usually when I have these talks with people, I go, well, did you already purchase the equipment? And then you're just looking for me to design around that with however many you bought. And he was like, yeah, we bought, these Aruba APs, these 500 series. I'm like, oh, but you said you wanted to upgrade to 6 gigahertz. Those are not
Right.
6. And he's like, wait, isn't that Wi-Fi 6? I'm like, yeah, kind of. So like trying to educate people so they don't make, those kind of purchasing decisions, the wrong decisions, or sent them back because now they've have the sunk costs and equipment. But so it's really
Right.
just about educating other people. What I learn, hopefully, what I learn, the way I interpret it is correct, and then I can educate others as well.
So what are you using right now to do your 6 gigahertz PCAPs?
I actually have it right here. I use the Etherscope. I also have a
Ah,
AirCheck G3. They're both 6 gigahertz, but those are the two that I use to do those frame captures.
yeah, I've got one of those Etherscopes coming. Um,
I
my
love the
employer's picked
Etherscope.
one up for us,
Yeah, if I had a
and
choice
I've
to go between AirCheck G3 or Etherscope, I would go with the Etherscope. That's just my preference because I do more than Wi-Fi. So having these little like
yeah,
SFP
yeah.
testers here, Ethernet testers, it's very useful for me.
Yeah, I've never actually used one of those before, so I'm really eager to get my hands on and just see what those things can do. Um, I was a little surprised with the the Ekahau Sidekick 2. It's 6 gigahertz
Hmm.
capable,
Yeah,
and the first thing I did was fire it up and try to do a PCAP,
yeah, and
and you can't do it. You can't do it yet.
not
They
yet.
keep
Yeah,
saying that it's coming, but you can't do it yet, which
yeah,
was uh, kind of a bit of a surprise for me.
Especially
Well,
because
cool. So you,
you have 4 NICs in there, right? That would be
yeah.
nice.
yeah, it would be nice. It'd be very nice. They say it's coming, and it's going to come in the form of their analyzer app. They're
Hmm.
not going to have the same Ekahau capture, um, Windows or Apple
Yeah, we'll see how they
app
do
running.
it.
So it's going to be,
I think they're trying to change
yeah,
things around or try to appease to people who maybe do more troubleshooting than validation, right? So maybe you just want to use that tool as a frame capture utility and have a little bit more options than selecting, a few channels. But we'll see how that turns out. I mean, that's what
yeah, we'll
Matt
see.
told us. Matt Starling told us it was coming, but he didn't go too much into how that's gonna look.
Right, right. Yeah, we'll see. So Roel, you work for another company, is that right? Or I know you have in the past. Are you still working? Are you employed by a
Yep.
particular company?
Yeah, I still
All right.
have a full-time job. Yeah,
Okay. But you also have your own, consulting business that
I
you do.
do.
Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. I have a
All
side
right, cool.
hustle.
So yeah, so how is that working for you? How do you kind of juggle the two?
Yeah, luckily, it works because they're non-competing. I work my full-time employment's with a university here in California, and my side hustle is IT consulting on a variety of things, primarily on Wi-Fi, but I also do network engineering stuff and reselling of equipment. So it it doesn't quite match up to my full-time employment just because I don't dedicate that much time, right? My commitment's to my full-time employer, but I am able to, for example, like I start work early with my full-time employer. Like I start early in the morning just so I can get off early in the afternoon. And so a lot of times I'll do my work then, or I'll do some work in the evenings, or I can switch it off. So maybe I wake up early in the morning, do some work for some clients, and then I work the rest of the day for my employer. And I have a lot of
Cool. And
vacation hours.
no, there's never been any kind of issues with juggling the two, and
No, not
no.
at all. A lot of times, if I have to go do work for my side gig, I actually take vacation. So I'll take a vacation day, and a lot of times when I do have an on-call schedule with my full-time employer, and a lot of times after during the end of the on-call, we get the Friday off. That's just part of the your post on-call thing. So a lot of times I'll take a Friday to go do something and do something with the client, and I just try to be efficient with the work and also not to take on too much work where then now I'm spreading myself a little too thin.
Yeah, yeah. I bet your family appreciates that.
Yeah, yeah. And that's one of the things I've been trying to focus on more lately is being present rather than always being behind this monitor and keyboard here.
Cool. Well, is there like what aspect of Wi-Fi that you haven't yet really gotten into at a deep level? Like what's on the horizon for you as far as continuing to grow in your Wi-Fi skills and abilities? Like what are you looking forward to learn next or to do next?
Yeah, I would say there's maybe two things. One piece is maybe on the automation side. I know Francois is pretty heavily there, but being that I work on my own on the side hustle part and also for university, I think adding a level of automation would make things more efficient for me, especially if I've got, say, a client and they're deploying all Juniper Mist. If I could automate that deployment, it would it would make me spend less time on that project, right? As long as I'm accurate. And then the second piece is more communicating and connecting with people when we're talking about Wi-Fi. So rather than talking purely technical, there's a lot of people that I interface with that don't know any of these technical terms. So being able to describe them properly in a way that makes sense to them is going to be highly beneficial for me.
Yeah, I think that's a huge one. In my previous role, I did a lot of that, talking to people who just really didn't know next to anything about how Wi-Fi works. And so when you start having those Wi-Fi related discussions, you've got to bring it down to a level that they can digest it.
Yep.
And it's definitely a useful ability to have to kind of adjust that how deep you go and that just that level of communication.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, cool. So last question for you then is, do you have a particular experience or project in Wi-Fi that that really stands out to you, something that you're really proud of that you've done?
I mean, there's a few. I've done. I once for another university. I once did a conversion of all their controllers. I think they were like the Wisdom controllers from Cisco, condensed them down to a couple of 8540s in about a weekend. And that was before I even knew automation was a thing. And that was a long weekend, and I did that doing I staged their 8540s from scratch, and at that time taking those kind of risks as a single consultant and having that a team kind of rely on you for that. I thought it went pretty well because I did quite a bit of planning up front, making sure that the configs would pass over, and did some tests and that worked, making sure all the APs come back online and having certain processes in place. If a handful of APs didn't come online, what are we going to do? Are we going to stop? Or are we going to keep going? Or are we going to keep going but have somebody else address that issue? I would say that was probably one of them, and also doing like a pretty large warehouse from scratch, or like a design from scratch for a large facility like a warehouse like that. Those are pretty rewarding as well when they're pretty successful.
Yeah, no doubt. I've done one of those recently, and when I was done, I just kept looking at the report that I did because I just thought it was such a great report.
Yeah, you got to celebrate those
Thank
wins.
you. No, for sure. No, you have to. Absolutely. Well, thanks for those answers. So, Francois, now we're gonna put you under the AP and ask you a lot of the same stuff here. So again, Francois, you're co-host with Rowell on the Clear to Sin podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just ask first then, because I know you didn't start out doing that with Rowell when you started the podcast. How did you get involved with that?
Yes, good question. Yeah, so Rowell started on his own, and just like you, I was, listening to his podcast, and one day I think I sent him like a message on Twitter, and I was like, I have this thing I want to talk about. If you want, I can help you prepare the episode. And he's like, why don't you just come on? I was like, sure. And so that's how I ended up on the podcast for the very first time. And then we did it like a couple of times. And then Rowell asked me, do you just want to join me as a co-host? And I think it was maybe 1 year after you started Rowell. I can't remember exactly. But it was a little bit after Rowell
Yeah.
started, and then we
I
can
actually had you on as a guest first, and I think
yes,
that was like my test to see how well we would do.
the French accent. You had to sing the French accent.
I was like, I don't know about French being. Yeah, I think it was first an interview with you, and then I ended up asking you if you wanted to join. And I'm trying to go through our messages and see when that was.
It might have been like 2016 or 2017, somewhere around these years. Yeah, a pretty long time ago. And at that time, I was, starting my business. Maybe I was like 2-3 years in, and I know you didn't ask the question yet, but I was kind of focused on Wi-Fi. When I decided to create my business, I kind of decided to commit to Wi-Fi. So I was saying no to any other jobs, pretty much. Even if I didn't have a lot of jobs, I just wanted to kind of focus my energy towards the technology. So that's how I stared.
That's awesome. That's
And
awesome.
also,
And
I guess I
Rowell?
didn't mention it, but when I was at university, I used to be part of the radio at the university, not for anything technical. I was more like the sports guy, and we were like commentating games and doing sport news and stuff like this. But I really enjoyed like the radio feel, hearing your voice and all of these type of things. So podcast is kind of like a natural evolution of web radio. Yeah, that's how we used to call it.
Oh, that's cool. So you're familiar with getting in front of the microphone then and
Yeah, yeah.
and talking with people out there.
Well, Rowell is more of the technical guy. He knows all of the the sounds and video stuff. But yes, I was kind of familiar with the microphones, and we were even using like chat features back in the days to have people kind of live commenting the shows, and it was pretty cool. I really enjoyed the feel of it, I guess, and the aspect of it.
Yeah, that is cool. Well, can you share with us anything that almost made you say no to Francois?
No, I don't think there was anything that made me say no. And Francois and I we've ever since doing the podcast together, we've been pretty good friends. Like I come visit him in Toronto. He's come down here in San Diego. So it's because we're on each side of the coast. I'm on the West Coast.
Yeah.
He's on the East Coast. So it can be a challenge trying to schedule a podcast. But we work very well together. So it's been pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Yeah, that's great. Well, Francois, tell us a bit about, again, like how did you end up in Wi-Fi, and why have you stuck with it for the
Yeah,
throughout
that
your career?
long. Yeah. Well, it's my story is a little different because I didn't get to Wi-Fi by necessity, really. I actually started to work as a network engineer, and I was more focused on routing, switching, and then I kind of evolved towards the security aspect of the network, firewalling, working on firewalls, VPNs, and 1 year I remember I had to do my review with my boss, and my boss is like, "Oh, everything is good, but on the con side, you don't really have a Wi-Fi experience, so you didn't really do anything with Wi-Fi." So I guess my ego kind of kicked in, and we're like, "Okay, what is this Wi-Fi thing?" And at the same time, I met an engineer that had a lot of Wi-Fi experience. That deployed Wi-Fi, like large Wi-Fi networks and voice over IP networks.
So,
Yeah.
Who was that? Name drop.
Yeah. His name is Cédric Terrier. He's another French guy. He's CWNE now as well. And he moved to Canada at the time to try to live over there with his family. But he had deployed like, a big Wi-Fi network in a hospital in France. And he had like a controller at home with a couple of APs. He gave me my first CWNA book, and he's like, "You should read this book." And at night he would show me some stuff on the controller. At the time we had BlackBerry's phone, so we could see BlackBerries on the wireless controller. I remember that, and that's how I started. And when I started to study Wi-Fi, I really like the the CWNP way of dealing with the technology, like the vendor neutral aspect of it, because it's kind of like how we learn in France as well at the university. And I really enjoyed the mix of networking and physics. And I guess I kind of found my passion for Wi-Fi at that time. And then I went through all of the CWNP certifications. At the same time, I also changed my job a first time to do more Wi-Fi, and then I ended up starting my business focusing on Wi-Fi, while studying for the CWNP certifications. So I guess I was really into networking, and then I really liked the physics aspect of Wi-Fi and the wireless, the mystical or the magical aspect of wireless, and
So all of the RF,
all of the
the
RF
spectrum stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess I wanted to try to understand it a little bit better, and that's kind of how. And then I discovered also made me discover the community. Right, it's like you should create a Twitter account, and you should follow this person, right? And it was like, Keith Parsons and David Aiken and, Andrew Van Nage. And so I also discovered the community that way. So that's kind of like how I got into Wi-Fi, and then watching the WLPC videos online. At first, I didn't understand anything. I was like trying to follow what they were saying. And then, I just, I guess I really enjoyed it. So when you enjoy something, you're kind of curious and you study this stuff. And then,
Yeah, for sure. Well,
yeah.
Well, I think it's neat that you had it sounds like you had a mentor. You had someone who kind of brought you up and gave you some exposure, gave you some access to some equipment, and just introduced you, like you said, to the community. And so, it's you had a mentor that kind of brought you into it. And that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So have you had a chance to then kind of repeat that process and bring someone in yourself, be someone else's mentor?
Yeah, I think, I mean, maybe not officially as, you're my mentor, but I think, I think we had the opportunity. I'm sure Rowell is the same for him. We have a lot of people getting in touch with us. Also, I do a lot of teaching. So sometimes you meet some people who are very interested in learning more. So I think we do have this role of kind of helping people when they're interested, sending them in the right directions. We also have, with the podcast, we also have a Slack group that we have, and we can help people as well when they get started. I'm also part of another Slack group that we have with the French Wi-Fi guys, and we kind of do the same thing. So I think, I'm not officially a mentor for anyone really, but whenever someone comes to me with questions, I like to answer them the best that I can. Yeah, to help out.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't know. I guess in my experience with Wi-Fi, I kind of had, I would call him a mentor, but not like to the extent yours was.
Mm-hmm.
And this poor guy, because I was like, you know what, whether you like it or not, want to or not, you're going to be my mentor. I'm going to keep on asking you to take me along on a survey or tell me about, whatever he was working on at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of adopted him as my mentor.
Yeah.
So
like your go-to person to go ask questions, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got people like that, then, use them until they say, stop bugging me, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So, so what are you doing right now in Wi-Fi that, makes you get out of bed in the morning, that it just keeps you excited about this industry that we're in?
Yeah. So, well, I've been doing more and more automation stuff. I think Rowell mentioned it. So I've been kind of heavily involved in that. I was kind of joking with a friend of mine and saying that last year I think I did more programming than actual Wi-Fi work, which is probably true. But I'm really enjoying it. I'm kind of focusing all of that around Wi-Fi. So it kind of feels like Wi-Fi to me, maybe from a different angle. But that's kind of like what I'm focusing on, and it's a lot of learning or relearning because I did programming at school a long time ago, so I kind of have some of the concepts, but a lot has evolved in that world as well. So I'm kind of learning also new things. So that I'm kind of focusing on that. And then also still do Wi-Fi work. And now have for my business now have a another engineer that works with me. So I guess I'm coaching him as well. I'm mentoring him as well.
There you go. There you go.
But that's kind of like what I'm focusing on. Where that you said that makes me wake up in the morning. That's kind of like what excites me. Building new tools. Doing some stuff that you've never done before. It actually feels like engineering, Sometimes clicking through a dashboard doesn't feel like engineering, but when you actually build something and it works the way you want, it actually feels like you've engineered something. So that's kind of like what excites me right now.
So with the programming or the automation that you're doing, is it Python? Is it JavaScript? I mean, what language are you using for that?
So most of what I do is Python. And then, so Python is great to do, scripting. And if you want to automate some tasks, use the APIs from the vendors and do, connect to your network equipment, get data and all these type of things. If you want to start to build like a website, a UI, then that's when you may want to use JavaScript or other languages to kind of do this. We are building a tool right now, but I actually have a developer that works on that with me, and he's taking care of all of this because I have like almost no experience in this. So I'm more focusing on the scripting aspect of things. The Python, I do a little bit with Docker containers as well. It's not really programming, but it helps deploy applications.
It helps.
Yeah,
for sure.
But Python is mainly what I focus on nowadays.
Yeah, Python has been on the top of my list of things to learn for probably the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I never quite get into it. But my problem is, so I've got 2 kids.
Mm-hmm.
I call them kids, but one of them is already a full-fledged, full-stack engineer. He's 22. He's a programming wizard. So I've always turned to him
Mm-hmm.
in years past to do any kind of like automation programming that I need.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays he's a little too busy for me, but I've got a 17-year-old son in high school
Mm-hmm.
who now I turn to, who's kind of the same thing. He does Python, JavaScript. I just had him build a tool for me that interacts with the Meraki API
Mm-hmm.
and pulls down various information and displays it in a web browser. He's using Python and React,
Mm-hmm.
JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't need to do
He's
any of this
17 years
time.
old.
You got 2 kids who can do it for you.
I know, exactly. That's why I haven't been learning, because I'm like,
You really don't need to learn.
I would say the problem with programming is if you don't practice it, you cannot lose it. It's not like biking,
No, for sure.
you learn how to bike and then you pick it up 10 years later and you're still okay. Programming, if you really want to get into it, you kind of have to do it like a little bit every day for maybe a year. And then you can you created your momentum, but it's not that easy to get into it, except if you have like if you kind of forced into it and you have like a use case and you have no other choice but to go full on. If you don't have such cases, it can be something that you kind of drag on the to-do list, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, you need to have something that compels you
Mm-hmm.
to get in there and learn something new.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's really hard to keep yourself disciplined enough. And, we've got a lot of other stuff going on in our lives, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
work and you have personal life. And so it's really hard to prioritize that. But you need to do it if we're going to stay engineers,
Well, sometimes you also have the, you question why you do things. You'd be like, okay, why am I spending so many hours doing this program where I can just go and click 10 times and then it does the same thing, right? So sometimes it's hard to get like the investment look back on how the time investment and how it's going to help you in the future. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't make sense. All right, so you kind of have to kind of question what you do and see what really is going to save you time long term. But yeah, it's definitely something new that's coming more and more into our engineering lives. And you see it with the young engineers that come up on the market right now. They all know how to do Python, right? It's nothing new to them.
It kind of scares me a little bit.
Well, if they can do it, you can do it, Todd.
I don't know. It's hard to teach this old dog some new stuff. All right. Well, Francois, I know you said that you started your own consulting business. So you primarily, or is it solely, you work for yourself, right? You're not working for any other employer?
No, when I transitioned,
Cool. So,
I kind of went all in.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So where have you worked previously? Any companies that we might be familiar with?
So I started my career with a company called CGI, which is like a service company in Canada. And I started in Quebec City. So I was kind of working as a consultant, if you will. So they would just send me to the customer, and then I would do networking for them. So I worked for them for a year and a half. And then I moved to a company in Montreal called Kinesor, which is more a smaller company. They roughly do the same thing. I was doing a little bit of Wi-Fi over there. And then after that, I transitioned to starting my own business. So I started fairly early in my career, which wasn't super easy. And also I moved when I started my business. I moved to a new city that I didn't know. I now live in London, Ontario. So it wasn't super, like, I didn't go the easy route, if you will. But looking back at it, I don't regret anything. Super happy about the experience, and I definitely learned a few things, and I enjoyed the process.
Well, that's good. It's a good segue into my next question for you, which is like, what has been, or has there been a particular role or project in your career that's been the most impactful for your Wi-Fi career?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's kind of like when you ask a soccer player at the end of their career, which goal was the best one. For me, I think the one that had the most impact was like the first one, because I had to do a lot of surveys. It was my first time doing surveys really in the field. And I was kind of like coached, by another engineer to get into the world of doing it, designs, validation, and such. And I remember doing this for the first couple of months of starting my business. And to me, it was, I think, up until today, I think it's still, one of the most important projects for me, because it was, the first one really. So I would say the first one. After that, I've had a lot. What I really like about Wi-Fi is that you get to discover the behind the scenes, right? You get to go places that usually you don't go to. So I've had a lot of good experiences, going into, factories or different places where you don't usually go to. So I've had a lot of good experiences. I think one experience that I remember really well is doing troubleshooting and finding the solution using my Wi-Fi skills. I was really proud of that. When you fix a problem and you fully understand what happened, and you're like, oh, cool. I was able to actually apply some of what I've learned in the field and fix people's problem. And in that case, it was just, they were just using the wrong type of antenna, which was interesting. But yeah, it's, those moments are like, oh, nice. I was kind of able to add my value to and make it better for the people.
Yeah, no, that just having that satisfaction of a job well done, that you actually solved someone's problem. I mean, that's what kind of keeps me going, is having moments like that where you're solving problems for people. And you have the experience and the skill set to actually get in there and solve those tough problems. Yeah, that's very satisfying to do. So what's next for you, Francois? What are you what do you plan on learning next or doing next to continue to grow in your Wi-Fi skills and abilities?
Yes, good question, because even I struggle with this. I don't know where to go next, but I think I need to do more. I need to do more of the programming automation. I'm really interested in that. I think I'm gonna go that route. I have a couple of projects where I actually work with customers and automating some of the Wi-Fi work they do. It's really interesting. I think that's going to bring me to new technologies that I don't fully know. So I know I'm going to have to kind of study different things that route. At the same time, I also have, someone else working for me. So I'm kind of a new manager, if you will. So I need to work on my manager skills as well, which is another other thing on its own. So that's kind of like what I'm focusing on right now, trying to be a good boss and trying to be a better programmer, if you will, while still being a Wi-Fi guy.
Yeah, managing people is a whole nother thing, which I've learned I'm not that great at. So I've had opportunities and I'm like, you know what, managing people, that's not my cup of tea. I'm just going to stick with, doing Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it's not. It's. I've had bad experiences as well, but you kind of learn as you go and try to take the bad or the good out of the bad and use it in the future. That's what I try to
and
do.
You have your own company that you're growing, right? And so it's not like you can say, no, I'm not going to manage people. I'm just going to stick with the tech stuff because it's your own company. You've got to do it, right?
Yeah.
You're the guy.
Well, you could hire someone to do that,
Well,
and you
awesome.
just do the work, right? But yeah, you're right.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Thanks for giving us all that information about yourself and your experience in Wi-Fi. So this next segment then is what I call the noise floor. It's when we have a discussion between all of us together. The discussion topic that I would like to talk about, because I gave you guys a chance to offer up a topic that you wanted to talk about, and you just said whatever sounds good. So
you're the boss,
I'm going to choose the topic. Yeah. So I know a lot of us in Wi-Fi are far enough along in our careers where we're considering doing our own Wi-Fi side hustle and starting our own consulting business. And I know both of you are doing that. And so I just kind of wanted to talk with you guys about that process. What are some of the, the pros and cons of starting your own Wi-Fi consulting business? I know, Francois, starting your business and moving to a new city at the same time where you have no existing contacts to kind of try to get jobs from.
Yep.
I mean, that must have been super difficult, really hard to move. So how did you make that happen? How did you, find yourself in this new city, starting a business, and then actually make a living for yourself?
Yeah. So when I started my business, I had landed a 2-month contract with the company. So that was kind of like my warranty for the beginning. But that's all I had, right? A 2-month contract, and after that, actually, I still had like professional connections to the people I met before, so I got a couple of other contracts that way. But then what I did, to answer your question, when I arrived in the new city, is I looked for an association that would help startups, and they had something in my city that they call the Tech Alliance, which is like an organization that helps tech startups. So I kind of registered for that and went into the events and started to meet people, network a little bit. And they were offering this entrepreneur 101 type of course at the Ivy Business Schools in town. And I managed to actually got selected in a Twitter contest to go attend the course for free, which was nice. And then there I kind of learned a little bit more about business because, I went to engineering school. So I learned a little bit more about business marketing, value proposition and all of these type of things. And I was able to network with other people, and that kind of helped me to know what I wanted to do. And also at the beginning, like, when you start your business, I'm sure it's same for everyone, but you try different things and you think you have your business model, and then as you go, you kind of refine what the business model is, and then you focus on what works. So I had to go through that process as well. But yeah, that's to answer your question. That's what I did, and then whenever I had some free time, I would just work. I remember working on my website. I remember doing some blog articles. I remember doing studying for certification. So I would do like self-development, or try to work on kind of producing content to bring awareness to the business, pretty much.
Well, it's interesting, because I'm kind of in that stage right now where, I've actually developed my website,
Mm-hmm.
And kind of got a very loose business plan that I've put together, but I've yet to really pull the trigger,
Mm-hmm.
and say, you know what, I'm actually going to go out there and try to drum up, some side work,
Mm-hmm.
right? I've not really done much there, but what I took from what you shared is that you didn't really initially focus on getting out there and finding work. You more focused on, I need to learn how to run a business.
Mm-hmm.
And so you went and got involved with other groups that can help, provide some of those skills or teach you some of those skills to run your business. And that kind of led you into other opportunities to network with people.
Mm-hmm.
Did that in turn also lead you into opportunity where you actually found work through some of those connections that you made? Or was that separate and you were just learning your kind of business skills at that time?
I don't think I have ever had jobs from that group. I don't think I've had like the direct work from them. But like you said, it can help me to understand, networking, business a little bit better. I was definitely interested in the business aspect of things. But usually, as engineer, it's not our first nature to go out and sell, right? But I was definitely interested in it. So it kind of helped me. Rowell helps me as well. Is into it as well. So we talk about it often. So Rowell is a big help for me as well. But
we talk about
there's
business all the time.
yeah.
There's a ton of value in that, though, right? I mean, there's a ton of value in having someone that's doing what you're doing, and you already have an existing relationship where you can just very casually and easily go and talk to that person and just run something by them.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of go back and forth with each other. I think it's great that you guys, do that, and it helps you kind of, be more successful in your own, business ventures.
Mm-hmm.
So Rowell, how about you? I mean, what made you decide to kind of throw your hat in the ring and do your own side hustle, your Wi-Fi consultancy? Yeah. And, how did you kind of pick that up and get that going? Because I think you've shared in the past, I don't know if it was like at a conference that you talked about it, or if it was one of your podcast episodes where you actually shared how much money you made.
Yeah,
with
I still
your side
do that.
hustle.
I still publish it
on
my website. On my own website, I publish anything about the business and business topics, because when I got started, no one was really there to help me, right? I didn't know how to do any of this. I had to do a lot of research. I didn't even know if I was doing it the right way. So whatever I put out there is just from what I've learned and what's helped me. And so I put those resources out there on my website, especially the money that I make, because I know a lot of people might not understand if it's going to be worth it for them, right? Because in California, when you start a business, there's a lot of upfront costs that you got to put down to start a business. And especially if you want to run an LLC and there's a lot of those incorporation costs, right? And this is just in California and in the United States. I got into it because I have been in a lot of different environments where where it was just run very poorly. And so I I worked at a managed service provider. I didn't work there anymore, so I'm like, I'll give this a shot. And I had ran a business before. I used to be a wedding photographer, so I kind of learned some business doing that there as well. And for me, it's like network engineering. I like to engineer the business as well. I like to do a lot of different tests, a lot of different strategies to see, what kind of sticks and what people like, what kind of messaging people like. And so even me, I did my website in the beginning myself. I had someone recently do it for me, but the language is something that I created myself. And for those who just want to get started and learn how to talk to certain people, I would recommend reading Donald Miller's book, How to Build a Story Brand, because he specifically goes down how to do your messaging on your website. And that's helped a lot for me. So, and people who I get come across my website and end up using the contact form or calling because they've read through it. And so I specifically resonate with some people. And when you start, getting your first client is probably the easiest. It's getting your second, third, fourth, and fifth client is going to be the hardest one, right? Because that first one could be lucky or it could be a referral, but consistently trying to get customers and clients, that's the hardest part. And so for engineers, you really have to change your mindset. And it took me some time to do that, but previously I had an IT manager role, so I had already spoken to a lot of decision makers. So I know how decision makers talk, the ones that I like to target. I know what their pain points are, what they're looking for, and how to talk to them. Like, technical speak doesn't work with those guys. They don't even understand what you're saying. If I say, hey, you need to design for capacity, they're like, I just want that. I just don't need Wi-Fi to work. I need less tickets in my queue so the rest of my team can do this more important work, right? So you have to speak to that crowd differently. And I also speak with a lot of higher level engineers, like senior engineers, but those guys I talk more technical to than I do with the managers, because the senior guys care about the technical stuff, but maybe not so much on the manager part or even the process side, like procurement. And there's all this business stuff that they don't teach you anywhere, like terms, like payment terms, contracts, agreements, insurance, like a whole bunch of other things that you may not even know you would need to get into. And I think if you're not interested in that stuff, then maybe running your own business might not be the right course you need to take. But it could be working with somebody who already has a business. Maybe you could hop on as an independent consultant for example, like my company. If I need help, I usually tap someone who has already done this kind of work and does side work, and I bring them on as an independent consultant, a contractor. And that's one way to do it, where you don't have to deal with all these other things about business, right? Because there's taxes that you gotta be familiar with, and all these different documents and permits and stuff you got to maintain with your government agency. So for me, it's all California, so it's a lot more complicated than all the other states in U.S.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. Yeah, and that's one thing that I admittedly don't think a lot about. Now, granted, I have not started anything yet. I've not actually billed customers yet for anything. But that whole billing aspect and the whole payment aspect, where you do the work for someone, and then when do you see that money?
Yeah.
And I remember talking to Keith Parsons in the previous episode, and he's like, one of our first jobs that he got when he was running his own business was this really nice project. It was like I think he said, I forget the details, so forgive me, Keith, but like a 3-month project where he had all these different, I think it was for IBM maybe, and he had all these different locations he was going to do the work. So it was to make quite a bit of money for this. But meanwhile, because it was his own business, he had to pay to get him and whoever was working for him at the time on location. And
Yeah.
when they're there, hotel stay, food, and all of that.
Yeah.
And so he was footing the bill for all of that before he actually saw any money from the customer. And when the project finished, he's like, okay, now pay me. They're like, yeah, I'll pay you in 6 months.
6 months.
What are you talking about? 6 months.
Yeah, and those are the things you don't think about, and maybe you don't even talk about that with your contact at that company because they don't even deal with that, right? Like if you were to deal with me on at the university that I work with, and I was gonna buy something from you, I'm not the one that pays you. There's a whole different accounting team that does that. They set their own terms, their own agreements on how it gets paid. So you need to know, is it going to be like a net 90, a net 60, a net 30? Are you going to get paid by check, direct deposit kind of thing, credit card? Credit cards are a whole other thing too. It's like, yeah, sure, I'll take credit card. All these different platforms take credit card, and then you find out that, oh, the platform I'm using is going to charge me 2% to use that credit card. So now I'm already losing money at this point. But it's a whole other thing. And also pricing is a whole other, it's different per region and how big the company is. And there's a whole lot of topics that I like to talk about, and I haven't even written down all those things, and I might just make it a video because I can rant on and on about what I've seen, what I've tested. And it's not like a ton of testing, but for example, like pricing, I've changed pricing a lot just to see what companies can take, right? Because you don't want to underprice yourself as a professional, right? You've got expertise. If somebody needs that expertise, a lot of it will come down to the value that you'll bring. And that's why I recommend reading that book by Donald Miller, because you can't just demand any price, because that price needs to translate.
Say the name of that book again.
I think it's called How to Build a Story Brand.
Yeah,
Story Brand by Donald Miller.
And they also have Raul. They also have the Story Brand website, and I've used that a couple of times. That helps you build your story, as I say, and align your marketing message. So you can do it for your company, or you can do it for like I'm doing it for a product that I'm building right now. So you can be a little bit more specified if you want to.
Yeah, you got to speak to the specific people you're trying to target, and so you'll learn things about your avatar. Who are you trying to reach? And this is where I have this appreciation for marketers, because once you start your own business, you really become a marketer, right? You're a sales. You wear all the hats. So you got to do sales. You got to do marketing, because in the end, like, who's gonna go buy this service or product from you if you're not the one who's gonna sell it? You can't just build it and they will come, right? It's not gonna work that way. There's so many of us out there who have service-based companies or product-based companies that it's something that you'll have to pick up, and it's not as easy as just building a website and saying like, hey, I do this. But most companies are gonna say, all right, I see that you do this. I now have to go find 2 other companies to compare you against for doing my own due diligence, right? Mm-hmm. That's what you have to compete up against. So it's a lot to deal with. And I think if someone isn't ready, if they really want to commit to doing even a side hustle and make it worth it, all the time you spend putting your business together, you're going to have to learn all the other things as well.
I would say the advantage of our type of businesses is that it's mainly service based, which means that you don't necessarily need a lot of investment to start with, right? Because you're just selling your services. Sometimes. I mean, you need to buy a laptop, but if you compare that to like opening a restaurant where you have to invest maybe 100, 200K,
you gotta be millions of dollars.
I mean, it depends on the size of the restaurant. I was thinking of a local fish and chips, but sure, if you want to go with it's a super huge cheesecake factory, it's gonna take you a couple of millions. But for us, I mean, sure, we're gonna have to buy some of the tools, but you could start, a couple of, like when I started, I didn't have enough money to get like Ekahau, for instance. I started and I used Tamograph, and Tamograph, did the job for me for a couple of projects. And then you invest, in your tools, and you can go slowly but surely. But upfront, you don't necessarily need a lot of investment. It's more time investment, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No. I think that's just trying to wrap your head around your own costs to get it started, and then Rowell, to what you were saying before, just how to figure out your pricing. It seems like everyone that I've talked to, like yourselves, who've actually started and now run a successful Wi-Fi consulting business, it just takes, it's like anything, right? It takes experience to figure out and fine tune what works for you, right? And what works for you may not work for me or somebody else. So there's no like surefire process. If you follow this process, then you will have a successful Wi-Fi consulting business.
Yeah,
right?
there's
Because
no one size fits
we're all
all.
different.
It's based on, a lot of it's based on where you live, and then there's a lot of strategies that you can take, but you gotta change it for your own business, right? Your own personality, your own character. Like what are you trying to sell? And the reason why I kind of focused on Wi-Fi to begin with is it's very niche, right? You just focus there, and that's where you start.
I lost you guys. Now you're both back. Looks like I'm going to learn some video editing skills this time.
You can ask your son.
Yeah. All right, well, Rowell, you were in the middle of saying something. Do you remember what you were saying?
No.
Okay.
I was actually gonna say something about pricing, because if you have no idea where to start, the easier thing to do is to kind of figure out an hourly price that makes sense for your business, so you don't lose money or something like this. As you evolve, Rowell does this as well, I think, but you evolve more into pricing the service, or the value that you provide to the service. So now that what I do is I don't provide hourly rate. Really, we just provide like a project price, and kind of talk to the customer, understand what they want, define a statement of work, and then I kind of build a proposal and say and present. This is what I propose. This is how much it's going to cost. This is the schedule for the delivery, and then work on that basis. But at the beginning, if you have no idea, like an hourly or a daily rate, I would
definitely start off hourly first, because getting to what Francois is saying, like a project-based price, the risk there is if you don't know how long it's going to take you to do that project, you may end up just losing money. And so when you do the hourly projects, I would recommend documenting how much time you spend on everything, how much time it takes for you to drive on location, fly to location, how long does it take you to actually do the work you were delivering, everything, even down to the meetings that you spend with these people, even down to the reports you got to build. And then you get a sense for, all right, it takes me this long to do this kind of project. So now you start diving into, after you've done a lot of those, you start looking into, all right, where can I optimize and actually be showing more value than someone who's just here to do work, right? I'm just not a cost factory here. They're not looking at me as this numbers guy where we spend money. And so that's where you end up coming up with project pricing.
Yeah, would you both say that when you first start out, would you say, is it fair to say that you probably undercut yourself? You weren't charging really what?
For sure. I mean, there's times where I work for free. I've worked for free for people just to get experience. Like, hey, I hear you have this Wi-Fi issue. Like, let me go do that for you. Let me fix it for you. Just, if I do well, recommend me to somebody else that might have the same issue. Like, I'll do that. I mean, I wouldn't go and advertise to the world that you're going to start doing this for free, but be strategic on, where you want to maybe it's donating your services to some nonprofit that might need it. I don't know. It's so you just got to be creative.
Yeah, for on my end, I started pretty low, and then one day I was like, oh, maybe it's too low. Let me double it and see what happens. And then, and then I got a contract where I doubled it, and then I worked with the guy, and the guy is like, your price is too low. You should increase it. I was like, in my head, I was like,
I've
what?
had that too.
So you kind of learn as you go too, right? It's just like anything
It's funny
else.
when you get a client tell you, "Hey,
Yeah.
raise your price." I've had that. I gave a price one time, and like, don't read too much into pricing for me because I work in California, so everything just tends to cost more. Bay Area costs even more. So one time I gave a price to a client, and I had done work with him before, and I think I quoted him around, I don't know, $2,000 to $3,000 for a project. He texted me and said, "Hey, I'm not gonna show anyone that quote, but what you gave me is too low. You need to increase it." And I was like, "Oh, okay, $7,000." And he's like, "Okay, I'm pushing it through." And I was like, "What?"
Now, were you basing your quote on like an hourly rate that you had set at the time?
Yeah, there's different strategies to do that. So I'll try to talk about briefly how I do it. The most basic part is knowing what your expenses are, everything down to how much you spend on gas, how much your licensing costs per year, how much is your time, right? And so once you outline all those expenses, you'll do the math to come up with what is the hourly rate to cover the base expense, to just cover the expenses, where I break even. I didn't make money, but I also didn't lose money. From there, you need to come up with a profit margin, right? Like what profit do you want to make based on that hourly rate? So if you need to make a 20% profit margin, there's a formula for that. Like if I need $100 to pay $100 an hour to pay my expenses, then if you take a profit margin, maybe I should charge 125 and I'll make a profit from that, right? And so a lot of it will be based upon, to start, on your expenses and what your profit margin is. Then as you get better and you can actually show more value than someone who can just come in and do work. Like, there's other ways to show value. It could be in customer service, for example. It could be just the way you work with these people. You can, or maybe it's how fast you can do the job too. Like, there's a lot of value in that, because if you can speak to the clients and know what dollar amount they are losing by not going with you or by not solving the issue, you can probably estimate how much you should charge and show them the value that way. Like, okay, I know you're losing, I don't know, $500 an hour by not fixing this problem. Why don't I come in, fix this issue for $2,000? I don't know. Like, you got to do the math, and then you could add more value on top of that and actually demand more, just based on like how busy you start to get. Like, as more people find out about you and your business, you can start to charge a little bit more because now you're in demand. But it's really about displaying that value. But to start, I start with hourly, and there's tools to track how much time you spend, and occasionally I still do that. If I'm doing something kind of new, I'll start tracking time and going, all right, how much time am I spending on this one client doing this one project? So that's one way to do it. I know there's a bunch of other formulas. I've written the math down so much, even down to, okay, if I'm gonna bring on a contractor, how much profit do I make from this if I bring them in?
Sure. Sounds, what I'm taking away from all of this is there's no escaping going out and learning some business skills,
Yeah.
learning how to run a business, because you can be the greatest Wi-Fi architect in the world, but if you don't understand how to run a business, you're going to be a lousy consultant. You're going to be a lousy, Wi-Fi business person.
Yeah, and try to find out who, your competitors in your area, how much are they charging? Try to find that out. There's ways.
So how do you do that?
You can call them.
Just call them and say, "Hey, I've got a project. I want to price it out."
Yeah. You
Okay.
can try that.
Expect a call from me, Rowell.
But yeah, hourly
Well, I
rate
think that
is a
one of
good
the-
start. I
Yeah,
think the
one of
downside
the-
that hourly rate is you have someone who's gonna try to be on your back about how much time you spend. I think that's
Yeah.
that's the downside.
Yeah. Well, one thing that Keith said, he's like, I haven't charged an hourly rate in, I forget what, maybe he said 15 years. It was a while. He always does a daily rate.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting to hear.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
heard some
I kinda
people
do.
do
So-
that too, and
A lot of us,
yeah.
a lot of us do daily rates.
So once we figure out how much to charge customers, how much we're worth, so then what? Like, how do you actually go out and drum up business? Like, what has worked for you guys? Because I know a lot of people like myself and others who want to do this on the side. That's where they kind of like, I don't know how to find business. So what's worked for you guys? Why don't you start us off, Francois?
In one word, I would say networking. If you, not the networking that we know of, but the people networking.
Not the network we already know how to do, right?
If you look at it, and I started to do that more and more, but if you look at it and you take some a step back from everything, you realize that it's just everything is about the people, right? And it's the same thing in business, right? Everything is about the people. And if you look at the past experiences you had with customers or with people you had to do job with you, what you remember is the people. You don't really remember all of the details about, the jobs and all of this. So I think you have to kind of think about it the same way and try to talk to people. What I did is, talk to people that I knew, and then put myself out there to try to meet new people, and then you kind of develop relationships that maybe one day will lead to a job. Sometimes you don't know. You just talk to people, you help them out, and then out of the blue, 2 years later, they send you an email because they need your services. So that's that's kind of like how I see a business from my standpoint. More and more is I just try to be genuine in developing a relationship and caring about the people. And I'm just in my head, I'm like, if I do this, I think it will come back to me in a positive way. Yeah. So nothing crazy. There's no secret formula. This is kind of like what I try to do on a daily basis. Yeah.
So when you say networking, you network with people. I think we all generally understand what that means. You open your mouth and you talk to people and find out.
It's the opposite, Todd. You don't
the
open.
opposite.
The secret is you don't open your mouth. You actually listen. You let the other person do the talking.
But where do you find the other person to talk to you about? How are
Yeah.
you finding these contacts to listen to?
So when you have a business, you always think about it, and I think it's the same with Rowell. So what I used to do is I used to just use my instinct and be like, okay, I know these people. Let me just send them an email or send them a note. And
Francois is very good at this, by the way. The way Francois is just like he's very personable. People trust him, especially his great accent. It kind of I think that helps. But he's very good at talking with his clients. And go ahead, Francois. I'll let you.
Yeah, so that's what I used to do. Like, kind of use my instinct, and then sometimes I would just shower and be like, oh, I haven't emailed that person in a while. Let me just do it. So I used to do this, and then talking to Rowell and seeing how organized he is with everything, counting every expense dollar, like he just described. I was like, maybe I need a process. So now what I do is I maintain like a contact list that has people that I want to follow up with. And then if my instinct doesn't kick in, I just go back to the list and see, okay, who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to send a message to? And then as an objective, I at least want to contact one person a day. That's kind of like my personal objective. Sometimes, I send multiple emails. Sometimes I don't. But this is, kind of the discipline I try to keep. try to keep the conversation going. And something amazing when you do this is people start to do it to you as well. So sometimes I receive messages of people that can follow up with me. So it kind of works in both directions if you can start the momentum.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's interesting.
He wants the secrets, Francois.
There's no secret,
Well,
Todd.
I'm trying to. I know
I'll give
there's
you
no
the secret, Todd. I'll give you the
I
secret.
know there's no secret. But I think that's the biggest hurdle I think that a lot of us face is,
Yeah.
you know, what is it that you're doing that's bringing in, you know, paying customers, clients.
Well, Francois is
so it
playing the
sounds
long
like-
game. Francois is a very long game type strategy. So, and I learned this from George Stefanik too. I used to speak with him like on Facebook Messenger. I'd message him and be like, "Hey, how are you buying these Ferraris?" No, I'm just kidding. He told me one thing that really stuck with me is he says to be very valuable and resourceful to people, and it comes back to like customer service, being of service. So even though Francois is not making money on this email, he's being resourceful to them, right? And I do the same thing. I will email existing clients and I'll say, "Hey, just so you know, something called Wi-Fi 6E is coming out. Don't get it confused with Wi-Fi 6. Here's the difference. Just so you know, whenever you start reading up about this stuff, here's what you need to know about this." Or it's like, "Hey, how are you doing? I just thought about you. You might want to leave out the part like, 'Hey, I thought about you in the shower,' that kind of thing." But he's like, "Hey, I was just thinking about you. Just want to make sure everything's okay. How are you doing?" Those types of messages go very, very long way, because yes, they will contact you 2 years down the road saying, "Hey, you did work for me. Like, I'm now over at this company and I need help." And I have repeat customers that way. They have all been to different, not all, but there are quite a few that have been to different job roles, and they have brought me along the journey that they're on. And so like I go and help them again. And that's because I don't treat them like a transaction. Like I always treat them like a friend, and I want to be helpful. And a lot of times that means doing things that don't make you money. So if someone has a question, and I know a lot of companies do this, if you want to ask some sort of technical question, they're going to charge you an hourly rate just for that consultation, right? And so a lot of people, they'll come out and reach out to me about, "Hey, I have this like question about this thing. I'm not sure how to approach it." I'll just straight up tell them like, "Hey, you need to do this. You probably need a design to, this new building, but if you just need to get off the ground running, here's what you need to do. Buy this and this and make this work." Or, if it's something really tiny, like I'll go help someone out. And also another thing that you could do as someone getting started is go reach out to managed service providers. Those guys are spread thin, and they're generalists and not really specialists. So sometimes those guys have projects that require a specialist. And so I've become good friends with someone here and in San Diego, where we're actually going to play tennis later this week. He runs like a security company, but he doesn't know Wi-Fi. And so a lot of times I'll help him on the Wi-Fi side. And if I have like a complex security project, I'll give that to him. And so we kind of help each other out that way.
Oh, that's great. No, that's great. So what I'm hearing, then my biggest takeaways, I think, are, one, reach out to people you may have worked with in the past who might need some Wi-Fi services, but just reach out with a very genuine intent to be helpful, right?
Yeah.
And I think that if you come across as genuinely wanting to help them solve whatever, Wi-Fi related problems they might be having, big or small, the small ones you can do, it sounds like, for free. And then when the big ones come along, they'll remember that, right? And then they'll reach out, hopefully, and engage your
just
services.
Be upfront with them too. If you're just starting out, just tell them you're starting out. You're trying to build a business. You can it's as easy as like emailing Francois. It's like, hey, it's me, Todd. I haven't spoken in a while, but hey, I'm starting a business, Wi-Fi business here, and just want to know if I can help you in some way, or if there's work you can refer to me, like let me know. I'm available.
Yeah.
And then later down the
Actually
road,
did that.
Francois sends it to you.
Yeah.
Or
Actually
me.
did that today with a couple of individuals I worked with in a previous role. I just reached out and said, let me just send these guys an email, because you know, they might be in need of some Wi-Fi. So let me just find out. So hopefully, to what you guys are saying, you know, I tried to come off as genuine as I could, you know, as like, you know, I'm just let me know if there's anything I can help you with, right?
Yeah.
Not let me know if there's any business, you know, that you that I might be able to get from you, right? It's obviously not the right way to bring it up.
Yeah.
So that's good stuff.
Well,
That's good stuff. Thanks,
Another
guys.
thing I would mention is to write. So if you've got your website, Todd, like write blog posts. That has helped me get a lot of business. So I don't really, I've tried actively doing sales, but it doesn't really work for me. But what really works for me is people finding me through my website, just because I've written something that they were looking for, and then they end up calling. So that's one thing that's helped a lot for me.
Oh yeah, that's good advice. That's another thing on my list.
It's-
to resurrect my my blog.
It's easier
and
for
kinda
us.
marry it to my website.
It's easier for us to write technical content than to pick up the phone and call IT managers.
doubt. Yeah.
Calling's
without a
pretty
doubt.
hard. It still works, but it's just not as easy. And for me, my time, I haven't been able to sit and make calls, and at least making the calls help me face rejection. That's one thing. When you start your business, is just get used to rejection. Like, it's going to happen. It's not personal. People just won't want to do business with you. So it's,
Yeah, I think everyone's gotta know that. You know, if they tell you no, it's usually not personal, right?
I get happy if I even reach someone that picked up the phone. Like, I once called. So there's another thing where I do testing, right? I went and called a big company. I think it was like Trader Joe's. I looked for some IT decision maker, and I tested something where I called on a Saturday, knowing that a big decision maker is probably working maybe early in the morning just to get something out of the way. And the guy actually picked up. This guy was like a VP of Trader Joe's. He picked up, and I like had this script where I was like, hey, can I tell you, I forgot. It was like something that I would try to help him with. And he was like, yeah, sure. Like he actually said, yeah, I'll listen. And so I said it, and I think I was just so nervous. I probably didn't sound genuine at all, because I was surprised he even picked up. And he was just like, no, I'm not interested. Can you just take me off your list? I was like, sure. But also just one thing I learned with that was just admitting the defeat right then and there. Like, usually if you could try to change your mind, that might work. And also, just because he said, take me off your list, I know a lot of people don't like this. I could probably call him again. He probably didn't even remember me or even wrote down my name. It's just at that moment in time, he
But
didn't
don't be
need my
that guy,
services.
Rowell.
No, there's a right way
No.
and a wrong way to do sales. And I actually keep
Yep.
a lot of voicemails and emails to remind me how not to do it. But a lot of it is a matter of timing. So if I try to sell you something right now, Todd, you probably would say no. But later down the road, you'll need it. And that's where the marketing comes in handy, is if you can get in front of people, they'll eventually go, I did see something. Or if you network with people, like, I did talk to so-and-so at this conference about this, and I need something now, they'll end up reaching out to you.
Well, let me ask you guys one last question, because I know we're running short on time here. I've taken a lot of your evening already. So you guys, you're known for your podcast. I know both of you have also taken opportunities to present at different conferences. Would you say, has any of that helped you professionally with your business that you yourself run? You know, how, if it has helped, how has it helped? Again, you know, having your own podcast and presenting in conferences, you know, how has that influenced your business?
You want me to start, Royal?
You take it,
Go
Francois.
for it, Francois.
I think so. The first time I presented something, it was at WPC, and it was on the topic, right? I was talking about how to become a Wi-Fi independent consultant and talking about different aspect of it. I did it mainly because, I kind of wanted to give it a go. I did more for personal reasons. I wanted to see if I could present in front of an audience, those type of things. But I think it maybe not directly, but it kind of puts some light on yourself and your business eventually, and it also helps you to create those connections with other people in the industry. And when you create connections with other people in the industry, they might call you for different things, or you might at least have that initial connection to someone, so you can go back to them and ask them other questions that may lead to other work down the road, right? So I think it has helped me, maybe not necessarily presenting, or I cannot quantify it exactly, but going to conferences, meeting people, getting involved in the community, for sure, I can tell you 100% that brought job to my business and helped me grow both as an individual or engineer and as a business, for sure. And then, when you get something from people from the community, you always feel like, you need to give back. So nowadays, when I do presentation, that's kind of like what I try to focus on. Is there anything I can help the community with, or, something that I might know that other people don't. So that's kind of like my mindset today. But yes, I think it can help put some light on your business or on the work that you do, right? And people also, for presentations, people always think that they don't have anything special. But I think each of us has something special. We just don't think it's special. But that's where it's important, I think, to talk to other people about different things. And then other engineers will tell you, you know what, you should do a presentation on this. I'm sure people will be interested in that. For instance, I have my colleague right now. I'm talking to him, and he's kind of started in Wi-Fi, even though he has some previous experience. But he has some very good knowledge on some things that I think could be interesting for the community. So I'm like, you should think about presenting on this or on that, and I know people will be interested in the community, even though you might not think you have something special. I think all of us kind of have something to offer. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I've been really surprised in the past how, just sharing an experience, a work-related experience that you had, configuring an access point or doing a PCAP or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever we may have done countless times, but actually taking the time to write it down and then share it, I'm always amazed at the response that comes back. Like, wow, people are actually mm-hmm. interested in some of this stuff. And I don't know why it surprises me, because I actually remember early on in my Wi-Fi career, and you mentioned this, Rowell, I think it was you, about the different blogs and podcasts that other people have had. Andrew Von Egg or mm-hmm. Von Agi, whatever his last name, however you say it, and Blake Crone and Keith Parsons and George Stefanik, like you mentioned. A lot of these guys have been around forever, right? And I remember actually going to their blogs early on in my career. I remember going to the very first WLPC in Austin and seeing some of these guys and like going into stalker mode and like following them so I can, at lunchtime, so I can sit at the same table as these guys, just impose myself on them just so I can just talk to them, right? Get to know them a little bit better. But yeah, it's great to just put yourself out there, right? And see what comes back. And so I've got to think that, the podcast that you guys do, you're constantly presenting yourself, and people are listening to that content and they're learning stuff from that. And now they've already got you in their mind for, if there's a time when they need some help with Wi-Fi, they know two guys at least to reach out to. So that's interesting. How about you, Rowell?
Yeah, Francois and I have gotten work through the podcast. We don't get a ton of it, but we have gotten some work. But as far as presentations go, I hate giving presentations. I just don't like it. But force myself to do it. For one, public speaking, just to help myself get better at it. Two, doing it in front of your peers, who there are a lot of smarter people in the room, is pretty intimidating. So I'm always open to feedback. So if I get something wrong, I always feel like I'm expecting someone to correct me. And usually if I don't get the correction, then I'm like, okay, maybe I did good. That's fine. But for me, it's mostly about helping other people. And so I'll talk about, I like to talk about other topics that at the conferences that are not really the technical topics, because there's a lot of those, and I'd like to try to change it up. And maybe somebody wants to hear about, starting the business. And that's what I did in Prague, is like kind of give a brief discussion about that. And I'm always open to, like, if I've had people come, message me on Twitter and ask questions, like, I'm very open to talking about those topics. If it means like trying to better yourself, or maybe you're scared to make some sort of transition, like I tend to test those things myself, just because I have the comfort of my full-time employer, so I'm willing to make certain risks in the business side because I have something to fall back on. But I like to just kind of share that experience. Like, here's what I did. Like, I kind of shared my experience on doing sales and how I didn't like it, and even though I thought it was necessary, but even now I don't really do direct cold sales, and now I'm more focused on just trying to show value, and sometimes that turns into some sort of paid engagement. Like, so it's really I use the presentations and conferences as a way to network with other people, hear what they're doing, learn from them, and then that inspires me to create other content that I write about, or we talk about it on the podcast, or put it on my blog.
That's great. Thanks. So are you both going to be at the WLPC? Are you both actually presenting in Phoenix?
I'm not presenting.
You're going to be there?
I'll be there, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Francois, are you presenting again this time?
Yes, something short. It's a 10-minute 10 talk presentation. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what it.
Awesome.
I'm not gonna say what it's about. We'll see. We'll see at the conference. I'm teasing a little bit, but it's something that I'm trying to build for the community. So let's see how it turns out. We'll see. It's more a tool than a presentation.
All right. Well, I will see you guys there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm going to be there as well. And so again, thanks guys. I really appreciate your time tonight. I know it went long, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate all you guys do for this Wi-Fi community that we're all a part of. You guys are huge contributors. Again, just want to give you guys kudos and thanks for that. It's helped me a lot, kind of broaden my Wi-Fi perspective. We all need more perspective, so it's great to hear what you guys are doing, what you've done, what you've learned along the way, and just the different topics you guys bring to us through your podcast that we get to learn more about. So thank you for that, and we'll see you guys at the WLPC.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
Good luck with the podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.